Before I show you something that will change how you see the world forever, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to witness, these cases where technology exposed the darkest secrets of humanity, you'll want to remember where you first heard them. And smash that like button, because this content doesn't reach people without your help. The algorithm buries the truth. Don't let it bury this. We live in an age where every moment is captured. Every street corner has a camera. Every phone conversation leaves a digital footprint. Every social media post becomes permanent evidence. And yet, despite all this surveillance, despite all this technology meant to protect us, the most disturbing crimes still happen right under our noses. But here's what's different now. Technology doesn't just record these crimes, it solves them. Sometimes decades later, sometimes in ways that make you question everything you thought you knew about justice, about human nature, about the very fabric of society we've built. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a collection of disturbing cases. It's a window into a new reality. A reality where Google Street View accidentally captures a cannibal, where social media posts become murder confessions, where birthmarks visible in grainy footage bring down government officials, where the internet itself becomes the greatest detective humanity has ever known. Some of these stories will make you angry. Some will make you question whether justice even exists anymore. And at least one will make you wonder if we've crossed a line we can never uncross. You're not ready for this, but you need to see it anyway. Let's begin with Vietnam, September 13th, 2025. The sun is shining over Hanoi. The streets buzz with that quintessential Vietnamese symphony of scooters, motorbikes, trucks, the rhythm of daily life. Among the thousands of commuters that morning is a 15-year-old girl named Nguyen Ha. She's riding her electric motorbike, a gift from her parents. A gift they saved months to afford. A gift they had to borrow money to complete. The Nguyen family doesn't have much. They're poor by any standard. But they believe in education. They believe in their daughter. Nguyen Ha has just been accepted into her dream school, and this motorbike means she can make the journey there each day. It means opportunity. It means hope. It means a future brighter than the one her parents had. She's excited. It's only her second week of classes. The world is opening up before her. At 15, everything still seems possible. At 9:20 in the morning, while passing beneath the Van Minh Bridge, her world ends. A concrete mixer truck strikes her. The collision sends her and her motorbike skidding across the road. It's an accident, plain and simple. These things happen. Tragic, yes. But accidents happen every day on busy Vietnamese roads, except what happens next isn't an accident. The driver, a 51-year-old man named Dinh Van Long, stops his truck. He gets out. He checks on the girl. She's alive. Injured, yes. Bleeding, certainly. But alive. Conscious. Looking up at him. And in that moment, Dinh Van Long makes a decision. He gets back in his truck. And he drives forward. Deliberately. Intentionally. With full awareness of what he's doing. He drives over Nguyen Ha. Then he drags her body beneath his wheels along the asphalt. Witnesses describe the scene as harrowing. They say the young girl was almost torn in half. Can you imagine? Can you picture standing there, watching this happen, understanding what you're seeing? Local people rush into the busy road. They risk their own lives to pull this 15-year-old girl from beneath the truck. They race her to Bach Mai Hospital, but there's nothing doctors can do. Within hours, she's pronounced dead. That evening, Dinh Van Long walks into the Phuc Yen police station. He's calm, composed. He turns himself in. And when they question him, when they ask why he did what he did, his answer chills every officer in that room. He explains it like he's discussing the weather, like he's explaining a simple business decision. Because you see, under Vietnamese law, if Nguyen Ha had survived, he would have been responsible for her medical treatment. All of it. Her hospital bills, her rehabilitation, her future care, everything, for the rest of her life potentially. But if she died, he'd only owe her family a fixed amount in compensation, a single payment, and more often than not, just a traffic citation instead of a more serious charge. The officers think he must be joking. They think he must be drunk. They think no human being could actually make this calculation, could actually weigh a child's life against a hospital bill and decide that murder is the cheaper option. So they test him. Toxicology, blood work, everything. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing. His decision was made with full awareness, with complete sobriety, with cold, calculated logic. Now here's where it gets truly disturbing. On Vietnamese forums, there's been a rumor circulating for years. They call it the underground law of the road. The idea that for some drivers, especially truck drivers, it's cheaper to kill a crash victim than let them live. A survivor brings lifelong compensation. Hospital bills, therapy bills, disability payments, public shame. A fatality brings only a single payment, often a small one, and usually just a traffic ticket. Truck drivers have been overheard joking about this grim calculation at roadside cafes, at petrol stations. It's supposedly a kind of dark folklore among them. Most people assumed it was just that. Folklore, dark humor, the kind of gallows humor that exists in every dangerous profession. But cases like Nguyen Ha's prove that some drivers aren't joking. In fact, investigators have found several previous crashes where victims were deliberately dragged to their deaths, where the physical evidence suggested the driver intentionally finished what an accident started. And the perpetrators received nothing more than traffic-related sentences. Think about that. Multiple cases, multiple deliberate murders, all disguised as traffic accidents, all treated as nothing more than citations, fines, points on a license. This time, Vietnamese society said enough. This time, a new precedent had to be set. Dinh Van Long has been detained on charges of premeditated murder. His trial is ongoing. If convicted, he could face Vietnam's harshest penalty, death. Nguyen Ha was known as a devoted daughter. She helped around the house. She cared for her younger sibling. She never spent money needlessly, knowing how hard her parents worked. She told friends she wanted to help her family, to make life better for them. She never got the chance, because in the mind of Dinh Van Long, her life had a value. It just wasn't one he was willing to pay. Before we continue, if you're feeling the weight of this story, if you're angry, if you're disturbed, leave a comment. Tell me what you think should happen to drivers like Dinh Van Long. Because your voice matters. These stories only reach more people when you engage, when you comment, when you share. Don't let this story disappear into the algorithm. Now let's travel from Vietnam to Russia, to a story that shows how social media has become both a stage for influencers and a trap for killers. Anastasia Teslenko, known online as Krasotka, was born into hardship in 1996. Abandoned by her father, raised by a struggling mother. For years, they were technically homeless. They shared a bed in a hostel. When her mother moved cities for work, she sent Anastasia to live with her paternal grandmother. The grandmother saw something in Anastasia: artistic talent, creativity, a spark that needed nurturing. She bought her paints. She encouraged her to express herself. And controversially, when Anastasia was just 15, she took her to get her first tattoo. From that moment, Anastasia adopted a mantra: I am the canvas. She turned her body into a portfolio. By 18, when she was legally old enough to get tattooed without parental consent, she'd already covered herself head to toe in ink. Coming from poverty, she was determined to make something of her life. She went to college, studied computing, automotive mechanics. She was building skills, building a future. But more than anything, Anastasia wanted to be seen, and she came of age at exactly the right moment. Social media made fame feel attainable, especially for someone with a distinctive aesthetic and a provocative mindset. Online, she adopted the name Krasotka. She began posting photos of her tattoos, her body modifications, her cosplay shoots. Gradually, she amassed a following: 300,000 followers across TikTok, VK, and Instagram. She wasn't just posting pictures. She was building a business. She sold art prints. She took tattoo appointments. She offered courses in design and computing. She transformed her online fame into legitimate income. Eventually, she earned enough to move into her own flat in St. Petersburg, Russia's cultural and artistic capital. She'd made it. From a hostel bed to her own apartment. From poverty to independence. From invisible to celebrated. But success online requires consistency. Anastasia understood this. She kept her fans engaged with a steady stream of posts. Every day, something new. Every day, maintaining that connection with her audience. So when that constant stream suddenly stopped in early August 2022, people noticed. At first, her account still appeared active, but the posts were old. Recycled content from months earlier. Something was wrong. Concerned friends reached out. Texts, private messages, DMs. But Anastasia's replies were vague, strangely detached. I'm feeling sick. I don't want to talk right now. I'll be back soon. It sounded like her, but not quite. Something was off. Friends decided to act. On August 10th, they called the police and requested a welfare check. When officers arrived at Anastasia's flat, they were met with a smell seeping from under her door. That smell, the one that every cop recognizes immediately. They forced entry. Anastasia's body was in the bathtub. She'd been stabbed over a dozen times. First in the bedroom, investigators determined. Then dragged to the bathroom and left there for a week to decompose in the August heat. Police initially considered a break-in, a deranged fan, random violence, but they didn't have to ponder long. Within 24 hours, they had their main suspect in custody, Dmitry Chernyshov, Anastasia's 24-year-old husband. They found him lying low in a nearby motel, and they found something else, Anastasia's phone, in his possession. The investigation revealed something chilling. After killing Anastasia, Dmitry used her device to impersonate her online. He replied to messages from friends. He posted on her social media. He made it appear as if she was still alive. He even took things further. He pushed a sale on her courses. He sold her possessions on marketplaces. He was squeezing money out of Anastasia's audience while she lay dead in her own bathtub. Think about that. Think about receiving a message from someone who's already dead. Think about buying a course from someone who's been murdered, with the killer himself taking your payment. It's a new kind of horror that only exists in our digital age. What was Dimitri's endgame? That's unclear. He hadn't made any effort to move the body. He'd sprayed her with perfume, taped up the vents and pipes to mask the smell of decomposition. He'd even extended the lease on her flat. Buying time. For what? To sell more of her things? To extract every last ruble from her digital empire? His defense was unusual. He initially claimed Anastasia had asked him to end her life, that it was a mercy killing. Prosecutors saw through this immediately. The truth was far simpler and far more sinister. Dimitri was involved in adult content creation. He'd made his income starring in explicit videos with his ex-partners. Easy money in his mind. When his then-girlfriend Margarita introduced him to rising star Anastasia, he saw opportunity. Dollar signs, ruble signs. Behind Margarita's back, he pursued Anastasia. He lavished her with gifts, bonded with her over their shared love of cars, wormed his way into her life. After they became a couple, he appointed himself her manager. And soon, Anastasia began appearing in his productions. Videos he uploaded to various platforms to generate income. According to friends, Anastasia changed. She became quieter, more reclusive. They suspected Dimitri was controlling her, that he wouldn't let her say no to his demands, not to staying home, not to posting more explicit content, not even to marriage. A few months before her death, Anastasia appeared on a talk show with her mother. The topic was the adult film industry. Her mother voiced concerns. She said Anastasia was being coerced, that she'd brought dishonor to the family name. But she also said Dimitri seemed mild-mannered and polite. She didn't fear for her daughter's safety. Then, midway through the broadcast, something happened. Dimitri's ex-girlfriend Margarita came forward. She described how Dimitri had beaten her, strangled her, exploited her in the same way. Dimitri, sitting feet away, dismissed her claims. Anastasia stood by him. She said she'd always wanted to make explicit content, that Dimitri had never struck her. She even laughed at Margarita's distress, said she was just acting up for the cameras. But Margarita's story was a warning, one that Anastasia should have heeded. After the broadcast, Dimitri stopped working altogether. He became completely dependent on Anastasia's income. Neighbors reported hearing frequent arguments, thuds. Many believe he beat her the same way he'd beaten Margarita. Their relationship deteriorated. Dimitri moved out, and Anastasia began spending time with a fellow TikToker named Kirill. She met with him repeatedly, and it's alleged that Dimitri heard about this new friendship. He arrived at her apartment one August night in a jealous rage. When he entered, he saw packed boxes, suitcases. Anastasia was leaving. According to evidence found online, she'd long dreamed of opening a tattoo studio in South Korea, a place where Dimitri couldn't follow. Because of his prior convictions for theft and evading military service, Russian law barred him from leaving the country. Dimitri could feel his wife, his sole source of income, slipping away. Prosecutors argued that he decided if he couldn't have her and her money, nobody could. The very first thing Dimitri did after taking Anastasia's life was message Kirill from her phone. He told Kirill she never wanted to see him again. In 2024, a Russian court found Dimitri guilty. His sentence? 8 years in a remote penal colony known as Polar Wolf. Conditions there are nightmarish, sub-zero temperatures, near constant darkness. But many feel his punishment is a slap on the wrist. Russia doesn't typically dish out heavy sentences for murder. Those are reserved for more serious crimes, like criticizing Putin. Later, the daytime talk show that had previously hosted Anastasia returned with a special episode about her death. They sensationalized it, turned tragedy into entertainment. After the broadcast, people mocked Anastasia. They questioned why attention was being given to, quote, a worthless adult actress. Others pointed out the hypocrisy, that Anastasia's death was being trivialized because of her association with adult content, while her killer got off comparatively lightly. Anastasia wasn't a saint. That's clear from her first talk show appearance. But she didn't deserve to be butchered in her own bed simply because she wanted out of a toxic relationship. As a final indignation, Anastasia's own mother allowed reporters to film her daughter's funeral in exchange for a fee. Even in death, those closest to her were profiting off her. If this story makes your blood boil, good. It should. Hit that like button and drop a comment about how justice systems worldwide fail women like Anastasia every single day. Let's make sure her story reaches as many people as possible. Now, we travel to Brazil, to a case so disturbing, so unbelievably grotesque that you might think I'm making it up. I wish I were. Garanhuns is a city in the highlands of northeastern Brazil, known for its mild mountain climate and lively festivals. To outsiders, it feels traditional, wholesome. But behind one unassuming doorway in this ordinary city lived a group who believed they were saving the world, one human sacrifice at a time. At the center of this case was Jorge Beltrão Negromonte da Silveira, a failed philosophy student, a martial arts instructor, and a man with a chilling past. Growing up, Jorge reportedly killed a 17-year-old named Luciano, but was acquitted due to lack of evidence. He later tried to kill his own mother after stealing money from her home. In 1984, he married Isabel Cristina Pires da Silva. The ceremony was modest, moving, though the mood soured when Jorge pulled out a knife during the reception and threatened to kill all the guests, as you do. Surprisingly, they lived a fairly normal life after that, for 2 years. In 1986, Jorge met and fell in love with a 16-year-old named Bruna Cristina Oliveira da Silva. Together, Jorge, Isabel, and Bruna formed a bizarre love triangle. They lived as a family, though many labeled them a small cult built around Jorge's delusions. Jorge displayed signs of severe mental illness. He declared that he'd spoken with an angel and a cherub. They'd instructed him to purify the world, to protect the earth from sin and overpopulation. As part of this purification, he told his wives they had to consume human flesh and sacrifice 4 victims, each representing one of the natural elements: air, earth, water, and fire. Once the 4 killings were completed, he said, a portal to paradise would open. They would ascend to a higher plane of existence. Unbelievably, Isabel and Bruna believed him. Together, they created a murder club. They called it the Cartel. Their first known victim was 17-year-old Jessica Camila da Silva Pereira. In 2008, she was a single mother, homeless, struggling to support her 1-year-old daughter. When she met the cartel, they opened their arms. They invited her into their home under the pretense of offering her a job. Once inside, Jessica was struck over the head, rendered unconscious. The cultists dragged her into a bathroom. They severed her jugular vein, drained her body of blood. Jessica was then skinned, dismembered, seasoned with salt and cumin, stored in the fridge. The trio admitted they ate Jessica's flesh as part of their purification ritual. What makes this even more disturbing is that Jessica's infant daughter was given some of her own mother's meat to eat. The cartel decided to keep the child alive, to raise her as their own. To the outside world, they appeared an odd but harmless family. They supported themselves by selling empadas and coccinhas at the local market, meat pastries, popular street food in Brazil. In February 2012, they cannibalized 31-year-old Giselle Helena da Silva. A few weeks later, 20-year-old Alexandra da Silva Falcao. Both were killed in similar fashion, lured into the cartel's home, struck on the head, stabbed, sliced up. Though they'd already selected their fourth victim, they didn't get to strike again. After their final murder, neighbors began noticing odd behavior. The smell of decay, the constant burning of incense, a small child who never attended school. The investigation really began after Giselle's family reported her missing. Witnesses said they'd last seen her entering the cartel's home. CCTV footage showed the group using their victims' credit cards. Police searched their property on April 9, 2012. Immediately, Jessica's child, now 5 years old, explained how she'd seen her father butcher 2 women. In a shallow grave behind the residence, they found human remains belonging to Giselle and Alexandra. Jorge, Isabel, and Bruna were arrested on the spot. The following day, an angry mob set fire to their house. Under questioning, all 3 suspects confessed. They spoke calmly about each incident, claimed they were purging the world of bad people, alluded to killing more victims that police didn't know about. And here's where technology enters the story. On Reddit, a user named NoFlounder9658 shared a disturbing discovery. Using Google Street View, they managed to find the exact address where the cannibals lived. Nowadays, it's concealed behind a metal door, but by chance, the Google car passed by their house in March 2012, right around the time Alexandra was killed and eaten. If you go to that location on Street View and click on that specific date, the image changes. A person can be seen entering the home. That person is Isabel, the head chef of the Cannibal Cult, forever frozen in time on Google Street View, either just before or just after she served her final pastry. Think about that. Google Street View, a tool designed to help you navigate cities, accidentally captured a cannibal returning home to butcher and cook another human being. Technology documented the crime without knowing it. The trio were tried separately. In 2014, convicted for killing Jessica. Jorge received 21 years. Isabel and Bruna got 19. In 2018, convicted again for Giselle and Alexandra. Jorge's sentence rose to 71 years. Isabel got 68. Bruna, 71 years and 10 months. In 2019, their sentences increased again. Jorge by 27 years, his wives by 24. Jorge was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was transferred to a secure psychiatric facility. He's since become the penitentiary's pastor, a published author. He's written 4 books, and he's now a vegetarian. The irony is not lost. As for Jessica's daughter, despite enduring bullying and being called a cannibal, she's grown up to be a healthy, well-adjusted young woman. But imagine being that child. Imagine learning that you were fed your own mother's flesh, that the people who raised you murdered and ate her. That technology, a simple Google Street View car, captured evidence of your mother's killers, that the world saw them frozen in that moment, and you can never unsee it. I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this, stories that show the absolute worst of humanity and how technology is catching these monsters, these stories get buried. They get demonetized. They disappear. Don't let that happen. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Make sure you see what comes next. Now, we travel to Taiwan, to a case that remained unsolved for 20 years because of a simple mistake. A mistake that technology eventually corrected. December 9th, 1998. Just after 5 in the evening, a farmer named Guo is walking home along Fuxing Road in Taoyuan, the same route he walks every day. He notices flames shooting into the air from a remote stretch of brush. The wind carries the smell of smoke, of gasoline, and something worse, something like burned meat. At first, Guo tries to ignore it, but curiosity wins. He creeps closer, hides behind dried grass. He sees 4 people standing around a fire, their identities obscured by masks and caps. They're talking in low voices, glancing around nervously. None of them look like locals. This stretch of road is the middle of nowhere. So what are they doing lighting a huge gasoline fire? Overcome with dread, Guo tiptoes backward, then runs home. Along the way, he encounters his neighbor. He too saw the fire, had the same bad feeling. They call the police. Officers arrive 30 minutes later. The 4 fire starters are gone. Responders put out the flames and examine what's left. A large sack with something heavy inside. They cut it open. Inside is the body of a young woman, burned beyond recognition. Face gone, clothes mostly incinerated. All that remains is part of a leopard print blouse, a black skirt, leather ankle boots. On her scorched fingers are 3 rings, 2 gold, 1 amber. Her hands are tied across her chest. Clutched in her arms is the body of a burned black dog. Some officers immediately understand what this means. In rural Taiwanese folklore, a black dog's blood wards off ghosts, blinds a spirit so it can't come back for revenge. The forensic doctor can only narrow the search so much. Cause of death: mechanical asphyxiation. Dead less than 48 hours. Around 165 centimeters tall. 25 to 30 years of age. Slim. Perfect teeth. 5-centimeter scar on her left wrist. Detectives search missing persons reports. Find nobody matching the description. They publish the case in newspapers and on TV. No one comes forward. With no CCTV and eyewitnesses who couldn't see faces, the case stalls. The woman is buried in Xingang Cemetery under the name Unidentified Female, Fuxing Road, Section 4. For 20 years, that's how she's known. Then in May 2019, a phone rings at the Yangmei police station. "I can't take it anymore," says a terrified voice. "She's been haunting me for over half a year. I want to tell you the truth about a murder from decades ago." The caller identifies himself as Yi Hao. He says the unidentified female is a half-Taiwanese, half-Japanese girl named Xiao Wen. She was 17, worked at a betel nut store on Zhongshan Road. The operator asks how he knows this. Yi Hao says he was friends with the store owners, a couple known as Little Pan and Ah Chi, and their associates, Zhang Bi and Baby. In December 1998, he found them holding Xiao Wen against her will. He didn't report it. He was only 15, feared what they might do to him. What made him call now? 6 months earlier, he'd reconnected with Baby. While drinking together, he asked what happened to that girl they'd been holding captive. Baby calmly responded, "Oh, she was burned." Since then, Yi Hao has had nightmares, seeing Xiao Wen at night, burned, on top of him, pressing him down, asking why he hasn't reported what he knows. The dog blood clearly didn't work. Yi Hao's tip is promising. But there's a problem. The forensic doctor was adamant the victim was between 25 and 30 years old. Xiao Wen was 17 in 1998. Could the doctor really have made such a big mistake? Detectives pursue the lead anyway. They discover that on December 25, 1998, a man reported his 17-year-old Taiwanese-Japanese daughter missing. Her name was Lin Meiwen, but everyone called her Xiao Wen. After immigrating from Japan, she struggled to adapt. Poor Mandarin skills led to poor grades. Lonely and unhappy, she drifted into the nightlife scene, frequented clubs, drank with older men. Her father scolded her, admitted to striking her occasionally. This created a rift. In 1996, Xiao Wen dropped out of school and moved north to Pingjin. Despite running away, she stayed in weekly contact with her father. He reported her missing after 2 weeks of silence. The name, age, dual nationality, district, time frame, everything matches Yi Hao's tip. It appears this case could have been solved decades earlier had detectives not discounted Xiao Wen due to the age estimate. Embarrassed, detectives decide to compare DNA samples collected at the scene against Xiao Wen's father. But the sample boxes had been thrown out. No matter. They'll exhume the body and take DNA directly. But incredibly, no one kept a note of where she was buried. The cemetery had been redeveloped. The 2 men who handled the burial had died. It looks like they're stuck again. Without hard evidence, Yi Hao's tip is just a convincing story. Then they get lucky. The forensics office discovers someone mixed up the 1998 and 1999 sample boxes. The victim's DNA hadn't been thrown out after all. They compare it. Exact match. The burned woman is indeed 17-year-old Xiao Wen. With the victim officially identified and a living witness on record, police move to arrest the 4 suspects. Little Pan, Ah Chi, and Baby are still in Taiwan. The 4th suspect, Zhang Bi, fled overseas. Officers debate whether to pick up the 3 still on the island. Doing so will tip off Zhang Bi, but ultimately, they decide catching 3 out of 4 isn't bad. Little Pan, Ah Chi, and Baby are living quiet family lives. 3 separate police units pick them up simultaneously and drive them to Fuxing Road Section 4. The lead officer asks, "Do you know who was burned here 2 decades ago?" He expects them to say no, to throw each other under the bus. Instead, all 3 drop to their knees and begin apologizing to Xiao Wen. The full story comes out. After running away at 15, Xiao Wen drifted into the betel nut shop. Little Pan quickly took a liking to the new runaway. She was cheerful, energetic, eager to please. He offered her a job as a betel nut beauty, a young woman who attracts customers by sitting in the window. She was an immediate hit. Clients referred to her as the Cherry Blossom Girl, a reference to her beauty and heritage. The place wasn't much, but Xiao Wen felt like she'd found a place to belong. She grew especially close to the boss lady, Ah Chi. At first, they were inseparable, but jealousy festered. Ah Chi began suspecting Xiao Wen had feelings for Zhang Bi. Problem was, so did Baby. Baby made it her mission to teach that snake a lesson. With friends, she pinned Xiao Wen down, beat her, shaved her head. Humiliated and distressed, Xiao Wen called her father. Through tears, said she needed money for a wig. Instead of sympathy, her father reprimanded her for getting involved with lowlives. He hung up. It was the last time he'd speak to his daughter. On December 6th, Little Pan realized money was coming up short. someone was skimming from the register. Baby immediately accused Xiao Wen, said she'd used the money to buy expensive jewelry. In a rage, Little Pan dragged the 17-year-old into a room above the store, tied her up, locked her inside. For 72 hours, Xiao Wen endured hell. Pan declared she was the store's punching bag. Whenever anyone felt bad, they could go upstairs and beat her. And all four did, repeatedly, with fists and sticks. On December 7th, they denied her food and water, sliced her face and thighs with a machete, beat her with a baseball bat, trying to force a confession about the missing cash. But her condition deteriorated. She could barely speak. Little Pan started to panic. He was a regular amphetamine user. Feared Xiao Wen would tell police about his drug addiction. As an active duty soldier partway through mandatory national service, he knew if reported, he'd be tried in a military court and face severe punishment. On December 8th, his paranoia peaked. He decided Xiao Wen had to be silenced permanently. The others agreed. While they deliberated how to finish her off, Yi Hao arrived unannounced. He came face to face with the four soon-to-be killers and their tied-up soon-to-be victim. The group surrounded him, ordered him to hurt Xiao Wen, making him an accomplice. He fled the first chance he got, didn't speak about what he saw for 21 years. After he left, the group acted. In the early hours of December 9th, Ah Chi took thin sheets of joss paper, wetted them, layered them over Xiao Wen's face, blocking her airflow. When she was on the verge of unconsciousness, Zhang Bi held her legs while Pan wrapped a towel around her neck. He inserted a stick and twisted until her cervical spine snapped. Baby stood by the door as lookout. She now knew what would happen if the others found out the truth. She was the one skimming money, not Xiao Wen. After killing Xiao Wen, they brought in a mystic who performed folk rites. Rather than call police, she advised them to kill a black dog and sprinkle its blood over the corpse, not just to blind the victim's spirit so she couldn't find and haunt them, but so the animal would carry their sin into the afterlife. They followed the advice, drove Xiao Wen out to Fuxing Road, set the fire. The group immediately dissolved the betel nut stand, scattered, cut all contact. 21 years later, 3 perpetrators were finally in court. Their trial began 45 days before the statute of limitations would have expired. Despite past confessions and expressions of remorse in front of the judge, they all pled not guilty, tried to pass the blame, each saying they only watched. At first, the judge gave the 2 main offenders, Little Pan and Ah Chi, life sentences. Baby, a juvenile at the time, got 14 years and 10 months. On appeal, the court said the offenders had been young, impulsive, and reformable. It cut the main sentences to 14 years and 6 months. Babies reduced to 14 years and 2 months. Xiao Wen's father got nothing. His civil claim was rejected. His daughter's remains, buried under the name unidentified female, were never located for proper funeral. He told media he regretted not being a better father. If he had been, he said, Xiao Wen would still be alive. He passed away in 2023, still angry, full of guilt. It's crazy that this case could have been resolved much earlier had the forensics team not been adamant about the victim's age. It's even crazier that it was finally resolved because a witness waited 21 years to pick up the phone. all because he said he was being haunted by a ghost and couldn't sleep anymore. And it's infuriating that the perpetrators are serving such short sentences, with one getting away scot-free. Xiao Wen finally has her name back, but she still hasn't been given the justice she deserves. Technology made identifying her possible, but technology couldn't force humans to care enough to do it sooner. If you're still watching, if you're still with me through these horrifying stories, you need to comment right now. Tell me which case has affected you most, because engagement is how YouTube decides whether to show this to more people. And these stories deserve to be known. They deserve to be remembered. Don't let them disappear. Now we travel back to the ocean, to a case that shows how cruise ships were, and arguably still are, floating cities where crimes happen and evidence vanishes into the sea. March 23, 1998. Amy Lynn Bradley, a 23-year-old woman from Virginia, boards the Rhapsody of the Seas with her family. Her parents, Iva and Ron, had won cruise tickets through a sweepstake. Being generous, they offered to pay for Amy and her brother Brad to join them. Amy was initially hesitant. She loved swimming, but had a mild phobia of the open ocean. She also had a fear of heights. The upper deck of the cruise ship was 105 feet above the waterline. But when her brother accepted, so did Amy. The siblings were close. She saw it as an opportunity to enjoy a week of sun, sightseeing, and family bonding. On March 21st, the Bradleys boarded. The ship was an 11-deck cruise liner operated by Royal Caribbean, bound for Curacao. On the morning of March 23rd, the ship docked in Aruba. The Bradleys spent the day exploring. That evening, they got dressed up for dinner. The ship's photographer took pictures of them in formal wear. Amy drew a lot of attention during dinner, not just from passengers, from crew members. Several waiters suggested taking her to Carlos and Charlie's while docked in Aruba. Incidentally, the same venue where Natalie Holloway would disappear 7 years later. Amy turned down their offers, told her dad they gave her the creeps. She expressed repeated discomfort throughout those first days, told her family she felt uneasy around certain crew members, didn't want to leave the ship unaccompanied. After dinner, the Bradleys changed into casual clothes. Amy and Brad went to the onboard casino. Their mother went to buy their formal photos, but she noticed all pictures of Amy were gone. The photographer recalled printing the images, was unsure who removed them. He reprinted them. Eva assumed there'd been some mix-up. Later, Amy and Brad headed to the Viking Lounge, a nightclub on the 9th deck. They danced, had a few drinks, returned to their cabin around 3:35 a.m. on the 24th. They stayed up talking on their balcony, discussing upcoming plans for Curacao. Eventually, Brad went to bed, leaving Amy alone outside. At 5:30 a.m., their father, Ron, briefly awoke, looked out the window. Amy was still on the balcony, asleep on a lounge chair. "I could see Amy's legs from her hips down," he later reported. The balcony door was closed. "I dozed back off." When Ron awoke again at 6 a.m., the balcony door was half open. Amy was gone. Her shoes, ID, and belongings were still in the cabin. In that 30-minute window, she'd seemingly evaporated, but her cigarettes were gone. There was evidence she'd changed clothes. Walking off in the early hours was completely unlike Amy. Her father knew she would have left a note. After searching the upper decks for half an hour, Ron panicked. The ship had just docked in Curacao. Early birds were preparing to disembark. At 6:30 a.m., Ron alerted the crew, urged them to lock down the ship. "Don't let anyone off this boat," he told them. "Someone has my daughter." His request for an announcement was rejected. The captain intentionally delayed a vessel-wide search. didn't want to cause alarm and kill the vacation atmosphere. Shortly thereafter, the gangway was lowered. Most of the ship's 2,000 passengers disembarked. If Amy had been taken, this moment gave someone the perfect window to smuggle her off. At 7:50 a.m., when most passengers were already on the island, the crew made a single quiet announcement. "Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk?" She never did. Some crew members believed Amy must have fallen overboard. Perhaps after waking on the balcony, she stumbled over the railing. But the Bradleys dismissed this quickly. The railings were very high. Amy was very short. She was also a former lifeguard and strong swimmer. They were near shore. Add her fear of heights and the open ocean, and her family was certain she wouldn't have willingly gone near the railing. When others suggested she may have disembarked that morning, the Bradleys stated she had no reason to disappear. Instead, they believed someone on board knew what happened, and several other passengers agreed. When news spread, 2 witnesses came forward. They claimed to have seen Amy at 5:45 a.m. taking a glass elevator to the top deck, supposedly in the company of a Royal Caribbean employee. That employee was later identified as Alistair Douglas, bass player for the ship's band, Blue Orchid. A third witness claimed to have seen Amy with Alistair at 6 a.m., just before the ship docked. "I saw Amy and the band member walk over and up to the next deck," alleged the witness. He handed her a dark-colored drink, maybe coffee. About 10 minutes later, he came walking around by himself. These tips set off alarm bells in Brad's head. Before Amy's disappearance was publicly announced, Alistair had approached him and said, "I'm sorry to hear about your sister." When an editor on board named Chris Fenwick heard about Amy's disappearance, he checked video footage from the Viking Lounge the night prior. His cameraman had inadvertently captured shots of Amy dancing with a bald-headed man, Alistair Douglas. Curiously, Chris received a call from the ship's head of security, Luke Costello. Was told he'd need to hand over the master tapes. Chris refused. Feared the cruise company wanted to erase evidence to protect their image. As if to confirm his suspicion, Royal Caribbean lawyered up immediately, shut down communication with the Bradley family. The company was no stranger to controversies. Their ships had been the setting of multiple assaults and deaths in the past. After being identified as a suspect, Alistair was questioned by the FBI on March 25th. He admitted to dancing with Amy at the nightclub, claimed they parted ways around 1 a.m. He took the staff elevator. She walked off in the opposite direction, said he didn't see her again. His polygraph test results were inconclusive. Due to lack of evidence, he was allowed to walk. According to Amy's father, Alistair left that interview with a big smile, flashing a thumbs up to his bandmates. Meanwhile, search dogs traced Amy's scent to the gangway, the exit used by passengers to leave the ship. This backed the family's worst fear. Amy may have been taken ashore against her will. The Bradleys stayed behind in Curaçao as authorities launched a 4-day search. No trace of Amy was found. When they learned the initial ship search hadn't been thorough, the Bradleys reboarded, ensured every space was checked. Again, no sign of their daughter. Devastated, they were forced to fly home without her. It seemed Amy really had fallen into the ocean. But then came the sightings. 5 months later, 2 Canadian tourists reported seeing a distressed woman on a Curaçao beach. She was being escorted by 2 aggressive men. It was clear she wanted their attention. The second she heard me speaking English, she sped up, recalled one tourist. She was trying to get away from them. I was 2 feet away. Before the woman could speak, the 2 men ushered her away. The tourists described her tattoos: a gecko on her stomach, a Tasmanian devil on her shoulder, a symbol on her ankle, a rising sun on her back. All four matched Amy's. Even more chilling, they said one of the men looked exactly like Alistair Douglas. Authorities returned to investigate, found nothing. A year later, in 1999, a U.S. Navy petty officer entered a Curacao brothel. While drinking, a woman approached him, said her name was Amy Bradley, begged him for help, said she was being held there against her will. Initially, the officer didn't report it, feared disciplinary action for being in an unauthorized area. He simply told the woman where his ship was docked. Two men arrived and ordered her upstairs. The officer came forward in 2002 after retiring, when he saw a photo of that same woman in a magazine discussing Amy's disappearance. By then, the building had burned down. Any potential records were gone. In late 1999, the Bradley family received a message from a man named Frank Jones. He claimed to be a former Navy SEAL commanding an elite team of mercenaries. According to him, Amy was being held inside a heavily guarded compound. Frank sent them photos of a woman bearing Amy's tattoos, convincing the Bradleys his intel was sound. For months, Frank fed them updates, sightings, movements, plans for a rescue. But there was a catch. He needed money. With the help of the National Center for Missing Children, the Bradleys wired him over $200,000. They waited for the call that Amy had been freed. It never came. Frank Jones was a con artist. He'd fabricated everything, staged the photos using an actress. In 2002, he was charged with defrauding the Bradleys. He pled guilty, was sentenced to 5 years. In 2005, another witness spotted a woman in a department store bathroom in Barbados, visibly distressed, accompanied by 3 men. The witness heard the males threaten her, telling her she had to go through with the deal. Seizing the moment, the witness approached, asked if she was okay. The woman, shaken and scared, whispered, "My name's Amy. I'm from Virginia." Before the witness could react, the men burst back in, led the woman away. These sightings could be mistaken identity or fraudsters after reward money. The FBI offered $25,000. The Bradley family offered $250,000. But here's where technology enters the story. In 2005, photographs of a woman resembling an older Amy surfaced online. Tired, gaunt, frightened. The images had been posted on a now-defunct website advertising adult holidays in the Caribbean. Her name was listed as Jazz. An independent forensic expert examined the photos, concluded they were a near-perfect match for Amy. The facial structure, hairline, and piercings lined up completely. These pictures fueled online discussion, led many to believe Amy was smuggled off the cruise liner and enslaved by a human trafficking ring. On March 24, 2010, exactly 12 years after her disappearance, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead, despite no body ever being found. Some believe Alistair Douglas was behind her vanishing. Perhaps he pushed her into the ocean after she rejected his advances. Others suspect she was smuggled off by multiple crew members. But perhaps the simplest answer is most likely that these photos and sightings are red herrings. That Amy truly did fall from the balcony. After all, middle-class white women from happy homes are far from typical trafficking victims, especially when surrounded by loving family who will immediately search for them. When the operation involves smuggling them away in broad daylight. Traffickers typically target the disadvantaged, the isolated, the vulnerable. According to her family, Amy was planning to enter a photography contest. Could it be she stood on the small drinks table on the balcony to get a shot of the sunrise over Curacao, only to fall overboard in the process? Falling into water from a great height is like hitting concrete, regardless of swimming ability. They say it's the not knowing that's hardest. Today, almost 3 decades since Amy vanished, the Bradley family is still searching for answers. Technology gave them hope through those online photos. But technology can't tell them whether that hope is real or just another cruel trick. Before we get to the final case, the most disturbing one, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Subscribe. 2. Hit that like button. 3. Drop a comment about which of these cases shocked you most, because without your engagement, YouTube buries this content, and these stories need to be told. They need to reach people. Don't let the algorithm win. Now let's talk about Vietnam again, about a case so disturbing that Vice called it the world's first verified snuff film, about how the internet became a detective agency, about how technology unmasked a killer that police couldn't or wouldn't touch. In late July 2025, 3 video clips surfaced on the shock site Watch People Die, a collection known as the Vietnamese Butcher. The most shared video, tentatively called The Execution, is as simple as it is horrifying. A top-down shot of a man lying on a tarp spread across a tiled bathroom floor, pleasuring himself. Beneath his neck is a wooden chopping block. The muffled sound of dogs and vehicles can be heard in the distance, suggesting it was filmed in the middle of civilization. But there's nothing civilized about what happens next. When the man says he's about to finish, a second figure standing just off-screen steps into view, raises a meat cleaver. In several brutal blows, severs his head. Blood sprays across the room. The victim's body twitches and goes limp. The executioner immediately gets to work, pulling the man's head out of view, slicing apart his body with a level of precision suggesting this wasn't his first time. The clip went viral almost immediately, mainly because of the impact it had on those who viewed it. Though most Watch People Die users were well acquainted with death footage, this video felt different. More coordinated, more professionally set up. The room had been properly lit. The framing was intimate. And as would later be revealed, the money shot had been filmed by multiple cameras set up around the room. The next video, filmed immediately after the execution, has been labeled The Butchering. It shows the victim's body being methodically dismembered, limbs separated and arranged, organs washed in a sink, human meat placed in pots and on plates using chopsticks, certain body parts inserted into the victim's mouth. But of the 3 videos that appeared in July, perhaps most revealing is the first clip, the rehearsal. It shows the victim in a different location, an office setting, placing his head on a chopping block while a figure wearing Adidas sportswear and a Guy Fawkes mask brings his cleaver down to the man's neck, illustrating how he plans to deliver the fatal blow. Toward the end, the kneeling man asks for the cameras to be turned off. The masked soon-to-be killer comforts his soon-to-be victim. Both men stand up. The clip ends. The implication was clear. The victim wasn't only aware he was being filmed, he had willingly allowed himself to be killed for the purposes of cannibalization. As the morbidly curious soon discovered, the 3 Vietnamese Butcher videos were only the tip of the iceberg. They were part of a pack consisting of 11 recordings and 98 photographs being advertised for sale on Telegram, an encrypted app often used by criminals due to how difficult it is to trace exchanges. Limited access to this pack reportedly cost around $100. Full access set you back $600. The pack had apparently been circulating on the black market since February. 5 months before, parts were uploaded to watch people die. Not all of it has surfaced, but what has is enough to turn the stomach of even the most experienced gore hunter. In one series of leaked images, the victim's heart, kidneys, and other organs were shown cooked in an herbal stew with red dates and goji berries. Other parts were turned into a curry dish. In another set, the executioner can be seen posing in a mirror, holding the victim's freshly severed head. Some claim to have seen a video where the killer boils that head in a pot, though if it exists, it hasn't surfaced yet. Countless death clips have circulated online over years, but the Vietnamese Butcher hit the internet like a freight train. Vice labeled the execution segment the first verified snuff video. Snuff is defined as a murder filmed for commercial distribution, not just videos of real killings, not compilations of repurposed gore clips. They have to be produced specifically to turn a profit, not for pleasure, not to inspire fear, but for monetary gain. According to criminologists, no murder movies had ever been produced for the primary purpose of profit. Until now, perhaps. After reading the Vice write-up, I figured this mystery made for a good segment. However, I couldn't find any other English language outlets covering the story. I waited for more information. It never came. Slowly, the case faded from my mind. Until last week, when I was contacted by one of my viewers. This individual, who I'll call X, suggested I look into this mystery again. There had been huge developments. X directed me to a 106-page dossier created by the OSINT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam community on Facebook. Operating in the shadows using burner accounts for their own safety, this group had been conducting their own investigation, collecting open-source evidence, trying to name the victim and unmask the killer. This is the story of their investigation. OSINT began by Googling to see how much information about the Vietnamese Butcher was already available. Not much came up. Despite the victim's face being clearly visible, his family, if he had any, hadn't stepped forward. There was no indication police were investigating. However, because the circumstances were so rare, OSINT had a fairly good idea where to begin. Up until that point, there had only been 2 other known cases where one human allowed themselves to be consumed by another. Both occurred in Germany. The first was the infamous case of Armin Mewes, who met willing volunteer Bernd Brandes through Cannibal Cafe. The other was policeman Detlef Gwenzel, who killed Polish businessman Wojciech Stempniewicz. Though no hard evidence proved Gwenzel ate parts of Stempniewicz, it's strongly suspected based on their chat history. In both instances, participants met through online cannibal forums. It stood to reason the same was true of the men in the Vietnamese Butcher, given that both the victim and perpetrator spoke with authentic Vietnamese accents. OSINT sleuths began trolling through Vietnamese online groups dedicated to so-called long pork. It didn't take long to identify the victim, a 36-year-old man called Nguyen Xuan Dat. Little is known about who Dat was as a person. He lived an incredibly private life, had few known friends, at least in the real world. Online, however, he moved in very lively and very illicit circles. Since around 2019, Dat had been an active user of Motherless, an explicit file-sharing platform only accessible by VPN that catered to the most hardcore deviant tastes. On that site and various other extreme forums, he used variations of the handle, "that beheading." His posts, both on Facebook and those niche sites, were fixated on decapitation and cannibalism, not of other people, of himself. In one leaked message purported to have been written by Dat, he reasoned, "Not only am I ugly, but I'm also full of diseases. I can't afford to live freely like normal folks. I've depended on my parents my whole life. What else could I do? I truly am a prisoner of my own fate." Fed up with his lot in life, Dat withdrew from society, dedicated the rest of his existence to his deepest, darkest desire. Online, he spoke about his so-called final fantasy, to be slain at the peak of ecstasy by a female executioner, then eaten afterwards. For years, he rigorously tried to find someone who could make his dream a reality. Slowly amassed a virtual group of friends who displayed similarly abnormal psychological tendencies. Evidently, his attempt to find a female executioner was unsuccessful. Later, OSINT members tracked down an account on a gay forum believed to belong to Dat. In one post, he shared his mobile number. They traced that number to a Zalo account listing Dat's birth date as March 10th, 1989. Cross-referencing details, netizens found a man with Dat's name and date of birth listed in a Thai Bin village registry. When two users called the village head directly, he confirmed there was a man by that name who left after his father passed. Dat's mother, his only known living relative, who reportedly struggles with mental health issues, lost contact with her son years prior, hence why nobody came forward when the video surfaced. Meanwhile, other users contacted the few friends listed on Dat's Facebook profile. One contact who used the alias Filet replied. Filet was a fellow decapitation fantasist. They claimed to have met Dat once briefly, said he worked as a fishmonger at Vinh Hoang Market in Hanoi. Crucially, Filet also stated they knew Dat's killer, a man they had both interacted with on various forums, a man who was part of their bizarre online community, a man by the name of Chung. According to Filet and others, Dat had been in contact with Chung for quite some time, but had become frustrated because Chung wouldn't commit to a firm execution date. Eventually, however, Chung agreed to kill Dat at a specific time and place. As shown in a screenshot provided by Filet, after the execution, Dat's account sent a private message to one of his contacts, a message which simply read, "Dat has been beheaded." It seems Chung didn't only have access to Dat's social media accounts. He was actively using them to stay in contact with his inner circle of death enthusiasts, perhaps fishing for further victims. Searching for confirmation about Chung's involvement, OSINT investigators continued messaging Dat's friends, including those he made on a homosexual group called Likes Beheading. One member going by the name Hua Choi responded, even claimed to be the killer in the videos. His confession was brief. Following it, Hua Choi stopped responding. Following this, exchanges between Hua Choi and other people, including Dat, were found, in which he offered his murder services. In OSINT members' minds, one of three things had to be true: that Hua Choi was just role-playing and inserting himself into the case for a thrill, that Hua Choi was an alias used by the real executioner, Chung, or more concerningly, that Hua Choi was another of Chung's victims whose account he had access to. After combing through Dat's Facebook history, forum posts, and communications, the community put together a timeline. January 25th, 2025. On Facebook, Dat posted a worrying status update which simply read, 3 hours left until the execution. On that same day, his various forum accounts recorded their last ever activity. This is broadly considered to be the day the Vietnamese Butcher was filmed, and Dat's life came to an end. February 25th, 2025. A message went out from Dat's account to one of his contacts explaining that Dat was dead. It's believed this message was actually sent by his executioner, Chung. That same month, the Vietnamese Butcher videos and photos went up for sale on the black market. June 10th, 2025. Dat's Facebook account posted its final status update, which read, "From today, I'm logging off from this account for good." This was further evidence that his killer had been maintaining his account. Following that final message, Dat's page remained online. When the Vietnamese Butcher videos surfaced on Watch People Die in July, and his page began receiving a lot of traffic, the account was manually terminated, proving that someone was actively monitoring it. OSINT had found their victim and all but confirmed the time and date of his death. But the most pressing question remained unanswered. Who was the masked man in the footage? The one they knew as Chung, though some naively thought he was innocent because Dat willingly offered up his life. In no country in the world is it lawful to kill someone just because they give consent. Euthanasia is an obvious exception, but that's for patients who meet specific criteria, carried out by licensed healthcare professionals under detailed legal and medical safeguards. Any killings outside those rules is still homicide. Whoever Chung was, he was 100% guilty of murder. Who knows how many other times this cleaver-wielding lunatic had preyed on vulnerable victims to fulfill his own twisted murder fantasies. Who knows when he might do the same again? It was imperative they track him down and unmask him. And thankfully, they had something to work with. In one photo, Chung appeared in a mirror holding Dat's head. Enough of his features were visible to tease out details. He had a stocky build, a receding or balding hairline, a scar over one eyebrow, monolid eyes, a green mask that some speculated might be military type, and most importantly, he had a striking birthmark pattern on his arm and armpit, and a tattoo reading "That Day 139. Hunting for more clues, netizens examined Chung's surroundings. In the butchering video, he moved through what looked like a small kitchen. Blue and white patterned floor tiles, red baseboards, a green door, red wall tiles around the counter, white countertop. At one point, a Lavi water bottle was visible on a table, as was a yellow bottle of Chinese brand washing up liquid near the sink. Some users said the decor, utensils, and cleaning products looked exactly like those seen and sold in Vietnam's northern border provinces, which helped narrow down the search. But frustratingly, that's where OSINT hit a dead end. By late August, the case was burning out. For months, no new developments were announced. It seemed like the Vietnamese Butcher was destined to join countless other internet mysteries that would forever remain unsolved. But then, just last month, the story exploded again. In the third week of November 2025, an anonymous Facebook user, who we'll refer to as the whistleblower, or WB, stepped forward, claimed to have been in direct contact with both Dat and the executioner. This person shared fresh screenshots of their final correspondence from Dat, which they received on January 25th, 2025. In a message sent at 2:40 p.m., Dat told WB that the execution would occur in about 3 hours, putting his time of death somewhere around 5:30 to 6:00 p.m. Dat also mentioned having shared the whistleblower's details with the executioner, suggesting WB was considering offering themselves up to be butchered. Since then, WB had clearly changed their mind. Instead of stepping into the executioner's path, they were stepping forward to help advance the investigation, saying they wanted Dat's killer brought to justice, even if he consented to his fate. Crucially, WB released their chat history with the supposed killer, a man whose name on Facebook was Cam Tan Chung. In those messages, Chung said that Dat's bones have already become fertilizer. He invited the whistleblower to discuss his upcoming beheading in person, asked to meet at a specific address, a street in Hulu Town, Langsun Province. The pin seemed to be just outside a government tax department. For the first time, the hunt for Chung had something solid, a full name, and a physical location. Enter a YouTube channel called The Curious One. This creator had been covering the case using 3D reconstructions of the crime scene. Now, with the name and address, he started cross-referencing everything the community had found with public social media profiles. Stated he had identified the killer. However, before he could reveal anything specific, he presumably received some form of death threat. Posted, "The forces behind this are too powerful enough to swallow our entire team. So the investigation will end here." He also said if anything happened to him, all information he'd found would become public. Along with that message, he shared a partial image of the suspect's face and a blurred screenshot of one of his usernames. It didn't take long for OSINT members to unblur that name, Tanchungwan. From that point, the web of connections began to form. The handle, Tanchung51s and similar variants, appeared across multiple platforms, anonymous forums, Instagram, TikTok. Crucially, many were linked with a Twitter account called Duong LS, which in turn linked back to a Facebook account belonging to Duong Van Sang, a seemingly normal married father of two in his late 50s who lived in Langsun close to the Chinese border. He was a retired deputy head of a market management department, or MMD team, as well as the head of Langsun City's Duong family, a large clan with thousands of members. Sang's photos showed a man who lived a comfortable lifestyle. He held a senior bureaucratic role, enjoyed a large amount of status within his community, had strong ties to the government, not only through his own work, but also through his wife and sons. Could he really be the Chung people were searching for? Well, as it turned out, Sang's eldest son was named Tan Chung, and that same son's birthday just so happened to be the 13th of September. That day, 13 to 9. It was a coincidence that was hard to ignore, as were the clothes his son had been pictured wearing, which matched perfectly with the clothes worn by the masked figure in the rehearsal video. Though some think this points towards Sang's son being involved in production, the masked individual clearly has a receding hairline and a body type that more closely matches suspect Sang. Perhaps he borrowed his son's sportswear. Perhaps they owned a matching pair. Either way, private messages sent by the Cam Tan Chung profile contained photos which strongly suggested the person operating the account was indeed Sang, and that he was simply using his own child's name online as a cover. Though some think Sang may not have been working alone, there's zero evidence at this point that his son was involved in any way. People began poring over Sang's old photos, including ones from a second largely abandoned Facebook account that he hadn't locked down in time, started comparing images side by side. What they found was chilling. Sang had a circular birthmark on his shin, which matched a mark visible on the executioner's leg. A prominent birthmark on his right bicep and armpit area was very similar to the one seen in the butcher's photos. Scars and marks on Sang's face lined up with those seen on the killer, as did the tattoo placement. His hairline and facial structure were eerily similar. An image showing the outside of Sang's house contains another hidden detail: a pair of flip-flops identical to the ones worn by the killer in the execution clip. Digging deeper, people found a TikTok video Sang had filmed at an MMD building known as Market Management Team Number 3. The background of the office he filmed in was identical to that seen in the rehearsal video, down to the same plastic plants, blue fan blades, misaligned cabinets. Others dug up a news article which included a photo taken at the department's old Team Number 4 location, where Sang was second in command. In the image, Sang can be seen inspecting goods in front of what looked like the same kitchen seen in the butchering video. Same green doors, red tile trim, blue floor tiles, red kitchen wall tiles, white countertop. The location of the execution video couldn't be determined at the time. It was filmed in a generic bathroom, though it doesn't make sense that the killer would transport a dead body to a different location for butchering. Using common sense, the most likely place for the execution to have taken place is the same building where the butchering was conducted. Images have since leaked from inside Team Number 4's bathroom, now known as the most miserable toilet in the world. Looks familiar, right? Sang retired from his position in 2025, but was still working for the MMD when Dat was killed. But why would a government employee commit a crime inside his own workplace? Doesn't that strike you as risky? Well, there's actually a grim logic to his choice of venue. The assumed execution date, January 25th, was the beginning of the Tet holiday, when the Vietnamese ring in the Lunar New Year. On that day, government offices would have been deserted. On top of that, a market management department office would have a kitchen, cooking gear, and an incinerator for destroying confiscated goods. Sang supposedly volunteered to remain at the office for 5 days during that Lunar New Year period, while all other officers and employees took a break. As the online dragnet tightened, Sang found himself at the center of a digital storm. For months, he had secretly been a member of online communities discussing the case, including the OSINT Facebook group, monitoring the investigation, reading the threads, commenting on updates, no doubt feeling a thrill at being the hidden villain in a story the whole country was whispering about. He had even reacted with laughing emojis when users expressed frustration at the investigation's dwindling progress. After being exposed, however, he began leaving his own series of bizarre and agitated posts on the group's timeline, saying things like, "I am the executioner. Who can catch me? Let me tell you straight, you are the real executioners because you want people to die so that you can celebrate. Isn't that right? I've lived 60 years in this world. I'm no longer afraid of death. Anyone who wants to meet me is invited to my house." To some, this looked like the guilty flailing of a man suddenly realizing the internet had found him out. To others, it was the panicked confusion of someone being falsely accused on a massive scale. Perhaps out of loyalty, Sang came to his own defense in an equally strange way, posting and later deleting a photo of his lunch with the caption, "Come on, it's just a few pieces of human meat, likely just a taunting bit of dark humor. But I'm going to censor that image anyway, just in case." At this juncture, the evidence was compelling. Digital forensics added more layers. Some users attempted to reset passwords for 2 of Sang's email addresses. Both routed two-factor authentication through the same Oppo Reno 2 5G device. Password reset attempts for an email linked to Dat's phone number, also pinged from that same device. Another entry into OSINT's growing list of coincidences. Looking at the digital trail associated with Sang's online handles, a disturbing profile emerged. The man behind those accounts appeared to have started out using social media to seek casual flings and flirtations on gay forums. Then, over the course of 2 decades, gradually adopted a master persona, someone who wants to dominate, humiliate, and torture his partners. Eventually, he developed an obsession with cutting and cannibalism. In 2022, Sang uploaded photos of a dismembered body to a forum, saying he wanted to toughen up other members. The images were later removed. Where he sourced them remains unclear. Screenshots also show him trying to order sliced-off pieces of male anatomy from suppliers in southern Vietnam. Parts believed to have come from gender affirmation surgeries or from men willing to sell body parts for money. In the eyes of the Vietnamese online community, the stack of coincidences against Sang was enough to label him the prime suspect. The body marks, the tattoo, the kitchen, the office, devices, addresses, handles, the post history. Now, they just needed the authorities to actually investigate and confirm their suspicion through forensics. Yet, despite being made aware of the Vietnamese Butcher videos, for months, authorities sat on their hands. Comments made on the Lang Son police page asking them to take action were seemingly deleted. Some called this laziness. Others thought they were trying to protect Vietnam's safe image. Others still labeled them corrupt. Given Sang's status and ties to the party, many feared he may have been using his influence to shut down the investigation. And given the attention he was now receiving, might start to target individual members of the OSINT group. As a safety precaution, the majority of members continued their investigation anonymously. After spending months compiling digital breadcrumbs and spreading awareness, the then 20,000-strong OSINT community created the 106-page document detailing their findings, going so far as to translate it into English for maximum reach. The PDF went viral. In a matter of days, the Facebook group exploded in size. Their evidence became too compelling to ignore. On November 28, 2025, it was quietly announced that Sang had been arrested, that the suspected crime scene had been sealed off for forensic testing. According to a translation of the police report, they found 3 teeth suspected to be human under the kitchen sink, as well as numerous bone fragments located in the septic tank of the restroom, in the drainage cavity in the kitchen, and in the water channel behind the kitchen. Forensic tests are still ongoing. The report also states they conducted a search of Sang's home. This resulted in the discovery and seizure of 2 jackets matching what the perpetrator was seen wearing in the rehearsal video, as well as a space heater matching one seen in the execution video. Investigators also seized a mobile phone believed to have belonged to Dat, which was being used by Sang's elder sister. When questioned, she said Sang had given her the phone to use. Following his arrest, Sang admitted to being behind the Vietnamese Butcher. His official confession, as it currently stands, reads as follows. Around 2020, Sang became acquainted with Dat through social media. After talking for a period of time, Dat confided in Sang that he was participating in a group operating through a website called Motherless. Dat repeatedly invited Sang to join this group. At first, Sang found it barbaric and didn't dare join or participate. However, Sang continued to learn and research various types of sexual violence, gay practices, and eventually joined. Dat continued telling Sang about his wish to be slain in a specific manner. At one point, Dat told Sang he was willing to pay 10 million dong, around $380, to rent a location where this scenario could be carried out. By July 2024, Sang agreed and expressed the desire to perform the slaying as Dat wished. On the 25th of January 2025, Sang summoned Dat to the Market Management Building. When Dat arrived, he brought 2 cleavers for Sang to use. At around dusk, Sang killed Dat exactly as shown in the video clips circulated online. After killing Dat, Sang used a knife to cut the victim's body into multiple sections, separating bones, flesh, and internal organs. He placed the parts into a pot and boiled them with the stated purpose of preventing rapid decomposition and odor. He then smashed the bones and placed both bone and flesh into approximately 10 plastic bags, a small portion of which was reportedly fed to dogs. He disposed of the remains at various locations, mainly by throwing them into public trash bins. As for the 2 cleavers used as the weapons, on the 27th of January, while traveling home from work, Sang disposed of them by placing them into the container of a handcart parked along the roadside. Some people take umbrage with how Sang's confession is presented, saying he's spinning the situation so he sounds like the victim, that he was effectively hypnotized or manipulated by Dat into following his instructions, when there's plenty of evidence he had been digging around in depraved online rabbit holes for decades. A post-history in which he talks about wanting to kill and eat people, and just 2 weeks after killing Dat, was actively trying to recruit the whistleblower as his next victim. Obviously, this is a very recent case. Information is still coming out as we speak. Still, thanks in large part to the work of the OSINT Facebook group, Duong Van Sang will stand trial for Dat's slaying. Depending on how things proceed, could face the death penalty, but this may not be the end of the story. Now, with more information to work with, it's clear this case doesn't meet Vice's definition of snuff, as Sang had filmed the videos primarily to fulfill his own twisted desires. I think it's safe to say profit came secondary to that. But what if Sang wasn't actually the one selling the content? As mentioned, before surfacing on shock sites, the Vietnamese Butcher was being distributed by unknown Chinese-speaking individuals through encrypted messaging apps. At present, we don't know if that was Sang, people he'd shared the content with online, or more worryingly, dark web associates who had helped him produce his home movies. This has led many to come up with a dark theory that Sang wasn't some lone wolf, but part of a broader black market of snuff traders operating throughout East and Southeast Asia. Other similar cases have already started to surface on the Chinese platform Bilibili, with a non-selling real footage of chopped-up Asian men, as uncovered by Vice in their article. One message from a Chinese distributor selling his wares read, "Price is 89 yuan to join the regular group, 198 to join the large group." It's a stable group that's been around for 4 or 5 years, tens of thousands of users, dumping corpses, body dismembering, executions, etc. Necrophilia is in the Ice Love group. If you just want pure, clean bodies, that's called forensics. And that's perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire saga, that the Vietnamese Butcher could just be one small piece of a giant puzzle. That there are potentially many more videos just like it being bought and sold by nefarious individuals that have yet to be leaked. People who kill others because they ask for it, or in some cases just because they can get away with it. People who sell human organs as exotic meat. People who sell them for transplant. There's certainly a market for it. Perhaps time will tell whether that's true or not. What is certain is that this particular case has rocked Vietnam to the core. And while official channels remain pretty quiet, the only thing ordinary people can do is keep the story alive so it isn't buried under the next wave of headlines. Again, I implore you all not to go searching for any of the media discussed in this video. It's psychologically damaging, and depending on where you live, could be considered illegal to view. All credit for this investigation goes to the thousands of collaborators over on the OSINT Facebook page and elsewhere, as well as the work done by YouTuber The Curious One. So here we are, 6 cases, 6 examples of how technology has become humanity's greatest detective. Google Street View, capturing a cannibal entering her home. Social media posts becoming murder confessions. Birthmarks visible in grainy footage bringing down government officials. The internet itself solving crimes that police couldn't or wouldn't touch. But I want you to think about something. In every single one of these cases, the technology was there from the beginning. The cameras were rolling. The digital footprints were being left. The evidence was accumulating. But it took months, years, sometimes decades for humans to actually look at what the technology was showing them. In Vietnam, a girl was deliberately murdered by a truck driver who calculated her death was cheaper than her life. In Russia, an influencer was killed by her husband, who then impersonated her online for weeks. In Brazil, cannibals sold human meat at a market and were accidentally photographed by Google. In Taiwan, a teenager was burned alive and misidentified for 20 years. On a cruise ship, a woman vanished and possibly ended up in online trafficking photos. And in Vietnam again, a man was decapitated and eaten, with the entire process documented and sold online. Technology saw it all. Technology recorded it all. Technology preserved it all. But technology couldn't make humans care, couldn't make police investigate, couldn't make society demand justice. That only happened when ordinary people on the internet decided to look, to dig, to investigate, to refuse to let these stories disappear. And that's the real lesson here. Technology is only as good as the humans who use it. It can show us the truth, but it can't force us to see it. So I'm asking you now, don't let these stories disappear. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like, drop a comment about which case affected you most. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, because the algorithm is designed to bury content like this, to hide the uncomfortable truths, to make sure you only see what advertisers want you to see. Don't let it win. These 6 cases represent only a fraction of what's out there. Only a fraction of the crimes technology has documented that humans haven't solved yet. Only a fraction of the justice that's waiting to be discovered. If you've made it this far, if you've sat through these 6 disturbing stories, you're exactly the kind of person who needs to stay informed, who needs to keep watching, who needs to help spread awareness. Because somewhere out there, right now, technology is recording another crime, another injustice, another tragedy, and it's waiting for someone like you to notice, to care, to demand answers. Will you be that person? Or will you let the algorithm bury this video? Let these stories disappear. Let technology document the truth while humans ignore it? The choice is yours. I'm Lazy Masquerade. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, if the algorithm lets me.